sailor from England remarked to a foe,
the reason we win is we pray ere we go.
But we pray as well, and just look at our dead.
Ah, but we pray in English.
the Englishman said.
I, my, me, mine, 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 I, my, me, mine.
I had a little box when my Lord made me, and in that little box I did put a tree, a pony, a taken, a bright green sleigh. Everything around me that my eyes did see. How can a little box ever hold a sleigh? A pony and a tree wasn't your boy. It can't, of course, fit in a tiny baby's mind. Its whole world becomes a little box instead. Well, as I grew older, my box grew too. Held airplanes and ships and a birch canoe, and school books, a foreign trip and college proms. Good times and friends aplenty, yes, and also you. But somehow in this box would only fit one school, one family, one country, and one social rule, and certainly one church for only my ways right, and anyone with other ways is just a fool. So I used to think, but now I must confess, at judging fools I wasn't any great success. Truth somehow lived without me, though I called it mine. What box could hold the world is just preposterous.
Good morning. This morning's reading is taken from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This is the 5th week, and the title of the reading is The Mystery of Avatara, or Divine Incarnation. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. The Bhagavad Gita in the 4th chapter states, as we saw last week, O Bharata, whenever virtue declines and vice predominates, I incarnate on earth. Taking visible form, I come to destroy evil and re-establish virtue. What is the mystery of this divine manifestation? Great avatars, such as Krishna and Jesus Christ, are born as babies, even as we all are. They take human form and go through normal human experiences as they grow from childhood to adulthood. They eat, they play, they may seem to suffer sickness and disappointment like the rest of us. In what way are they different from human beings? The important thing to understand is that, even as they are like us, so we are also like them. Their realization can be ours too. They come on earth to show us our own divine potential. The difference lies not in the manner of their manifestation on earth, but in the consciousness in which they are born. All things are condensations, so to speak, of the cosmic vibration, Om, described in St. John's Gospel as the Word. Most human beings, however, are unconscious of their divine origin. The avatars, on the other hand, come consciously as manifestations of that divine reality. As that gospel says in the first chapter, "And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Everybody, how is everyone? Good. I'm not going to start with the festival, although I will probably refer to it. There's only, there's only one question that really matters to any one of us. And it's the same question. And that is, what will make me happy? We are, and make no mistake about this, this is a universal thing, we are selfish to the core. Even the greatest saints have self-interest at heart. And if we mistake that, if we pretend that somehow being nice to others is going to make us happy in itself, we miss the point and we bleed ourselves dry. If we think that somehow being altruistic is the answer to life in a self-abnegating and self-denying and self-emptying way, we've completely missed the point. And we won't do it very long. I often see people get involved in the path, this path or other paths, and they give themselves totally, but not with wisdom, not with understanding, not with clarity, but with just kind of a wild abandon. And in a short period of time, they find themselves empty, and they contract upon themselves. And it's often years, decades, or lifetimes before they're willing to open themselves again and explore. And yet you see that the masters of all religions, the masters of all paths, are always the most gracious and generous and giving and selfless and open of all the people, of all the souls you'll ever meet. So there's a question, there's a puzzle that's thrown into the mix for us that we have to sort out. You know, when God created, Yogananda said when God created, the first time he created, this great energy went out from him, and everything just became still and merged back inside. And it was very dissatisfying. It's a little like opening a book with great excitement. Once upon a time, the end. It doesn't take you anywhere. And so he put out more energy, and it lasted a little longer. But again, everything just resolved into stillness, into the wholeness of his nature, and just the story was over far too quickly. So the next time he created, he put into the manifestation, into the dream, a force. In the West, we call it Satan. In the East, they call it Maya. But the force is designed to make things look different than they are. What happens is we all are being called back to the source, back to God's consciousness, back to that expansive wholeness that we all intuitively know must be the secret of life, must be somehow available to us. We're all feeling pulled deeply inside to that, and we get up every day going, today's the day. And all I have to do is just adjust the things of my life, and then it will all happen. Then I'll have lasting love and boundless joy and endless freedom and power and wisdom and clarity and the capacity to guide my own life and just this whole storyline. And we have it. We all carry it with us. We all carry it equally with us. 8 billion people on this planet, all creatures and all planets everywhere. Life is imbued with this call back to wholeness. And then we get up in the morning and we go through this process of trying to find how it works to find our way back. And we miss the point in so many ways. There's a cute story about the guy who was fairly miserly, and he decided to keep what was his for himself. And throughout his life, he just kind of clung to everything that he got and kind of tucked it away. And in the festival, we talk about the second phase of our incarnation, our movement away from God across many incarnations, and it's the revolt. And he just stores everything that he gets and keeps it for himself. What else is wisdom but to keep what is mine for myself? How foolish I would be to share my strength, my blessings, my gifts with anyone. They're mine. They were given to me. And even when we lose everything we had, we still don't get the point when it's taken away, because inevitably that which we hoard disappears. So anyway, this fellow, he died wealthy, and he got up to the heavenly realms, and St. Peter said, "Oh, welcome, yes, no, it's nice to have you here." And he said, "Okay, well, what's next?" He said, "Well, let's take it to where you're going to live." And he says, "That's wonderful." And they walked in, and it was golden streets, and it was beautiful, tree-lined boulevards and mansions everywhere, and everything was just gorgeous, just stunning gardens and flowers and light, and they go farther and farther, and he's going, "Which one is mine? Wow, this is pretty nice." And they get, pretty soon he's going down a narrower lane, and the lane gets a little bit narrower, and the houses get a little bit more tawdry and dumpy, and they're walking on past, and he's going, "Well, I don't know." And pretty soon they're going down this little tiny overgrown pathway to this little hovel at the end. And St. Peter says, "Well, this is yours." And the guy said, "You're kidding me. What happened to all those?" He says, "Well, we did the best we could with what you gave us." So another fellow, he was also wealthy and really attached to his gold and his money and stuff. And he finally figured a way to take it with him to the heavenly realms. So he dies, and he gets up there, and he's got all this gold with him. And St. Peter welcomes him and says, "It's so nice to have you, but why did you bring all this paving?" There are so many ways we can miss the point. So many ways we can miss the point. I'd like to read from Whispers from Eternity. It is Yogananda's book of prayer, demands, and poems. He said, we are children of the infinite. That God's bounty, his abundance, his wealth, his consciousness is all ours. We are that, in fact. Just like the child is made of the stuff of the father or the parents. But we have to remember it, and we have to claim it as children of the infinite. If we come as beggars, we get treated as beggars. If we come as children for whom these things are rightfully ours, we get treated as children. And so he wrote How to Demand. He wrote all these beautiful conversations with God from the depths of our own heart. Because it's from the depths of our own heart that the call to life happens. And he shows us how to pray in a way that is effective, in a way that connects us to life, that doesn't create more separation. This is from 191. Teach me to spend for God's work as I spend for myself. Give me holy health, but give my brothers even more, that I may enjoy my greatest health, not in this little body, but in my expanded being. Give me power, but give others more abundantly, that I may wield my own strength through the strength of many. Give me wisdom, that I may make others even more wise, and that I may feel wisdom's rays spreading out over a vast tract of shining minds, for all men are dear to me. Teach me to behold through all eyes, to work through all hands, and to feel the throb of my own feelings in all. Teach me to feel, act, strive, earn, and especially spend for all, as I do for myself. I want my health to serve also as a model for others' health. I want my own efficiency to turn away from earth's door, all inefficiency. I want the inner freedom that comes with wisdom, that I may enjoy that same freedom in all. May all souls everywhere find spiritual emancipation. A prayer of love went up from earth, and you responded. A ray of your light flashed out from the heart of infinity, burst downward through night skies of consciousness, and was born on earth for the redemption of mankind in human form. Many times has that light descended, drawn to earth by the call of aspiring love. Your chosen people have always been those of every race and nation who with deep love chose thee. Every week, we say those words in the Festival of Light. Every week, we repeat, a prayer of love went up from earth, and you responded. We yearn so deeply, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, incarnation after incarnation for wholeness. And when our call becomes clear enough, and focused enough, and deep enough, God responds. And this is how God responds. He comes in the form of an avatar. An avatar is simply someone like you, who has gone through the steps that it takes to fully awaken into the awareness of our oneness with God. That we are nothing more and nothing less than an expression of divine consciousness. And they come because Maya is so darn good at its job. Maya is so subtle and so effective and so determined to keep us from the light, to keep this drama and dream of life going. And we think, I will be happy when? And everybody, just take a moment, close your eyes, and ask the question, what is your story in that? I will be happy when? And that's the very thing that Maya is using to keep you bound. And think about how many times you've had that in the course of the last day, week, month, year, lifetime, or lifetimes, and it's changed. The content of that has changed, but the actual request, the actual thought, I will be happy when, remains the same. I will be happy when, and then there's this constant stream of different things. And we tried that, and whoops, that wasn't it. And we tried that, and whoops, that too didn't get it. And we're constantly trying to adjust the details. And the masters come, and they say, psst, it looks like this. And then they start to show us through their lives. And they live a life just like we live. They get up in the morning. They have breakfast. They spend their time doing things. They have lunch. They go shopping. They get entertained. They go to bed. They do the whole spiel just like we do. And they're involved, they're enmeshed in the story just exactly as we are. And offered the same temptations, the same solutions and answers that we're offered. But they choose differently. They answer differently. They respond differently than most of us because they see things differently than most of us. And through their example, as well as their magnetism and many other things, but through their example, we start to find a way to navigate our own lives so that we become like them. The reason they're up there, and the reason so many people refer to them, is because people see in them and feel in them what we've always wanted. They've got it. They've got the answer to that question, what will make me happy? And so little things like Yogananda growing up, he was a wild man. He was just huge energy, and he would do anything to find God. He was always on a spiritual adventure. In fact, he said, most people don't grow for want of spiritual adventuresomeness. Isn't that a fun thought? Most of us don't grow because we're too caught in our tiny little box of lack of adventuresomeness. We don't make it an adventure. But he would go and meditate all night at the burning ghats where the bodies were burned. He would go into these temples with these sub basements and go down and meditate for long periods of time. He would sit in the blazing Indian sun in lotus posture to master himself, to see how much he could allow that energy to pass through him without catching him. And he would sit in places where people couldn't even walk. He would do just anything that would awaken inside that increasing understanding that the limitations that we all so identify with were simply not real. They were illusions. And then he did things like, he wanted a motorcycle. He was a good young man, and he just wanted a motorcycle, so his dad gave him a motorcycle, and he used to drive that thing around, and he'd take his guru for rides in the sidecar. There he is, hair blowing back, and his guru there, big grin on their faces, bugs in the teeth, I don't know. But us, I don't know how many of you rode motorcycles when they were young, It's just, there's something, the call of the wild, the call of freedom. And then somebody one day was standing there looking at his motorcycle, and with such yearning and appreciation. And Yogananda saw it and said, "Do you like it?" And he said, "Oh, yes, it's beautiful." He says, "Would you like to have one?" He said, "Oh, God, I'd love it." He says, "Here you go." And he gave him the papers and the keys and turned around and walked away. We can't listen to these things, we can't listen to these thoughts and readings and not act on them and think anything's going to change. The Master comes to give us an idea of what it can look like, to show us what it looks like to live in the presence of God. One of the great chapters of the autobiography of a yogi, Yogananda's autobiography, for those who may not know it, is Two Penniless Boys in Vrindavan. He said, God takes care of those who give their lives to God. He didn't say sometimes, and if you behave just right, and if everything's perfect, and if you're lucky. He said, God takes care of those who give their lives to God. Everything that you have, even the very cells that your body's made of, the air that you're breathing, the seat you're sitting on, the clothing around you, the people who surround you, everything, you didn't manifest any of it. You magnetized it, but you didn't manifest a darn bit of it. None of it's yours. It all comes out of the ether, out of God's grace, out of the dream that He's dreaming. And for us to think that somehow we can control it, that we can manage it and contain it and maneuver it is ultimate foolishness. There are times in our growth where we have to work with those things because we have to learn to give up our egos. We have to learn to give of ourselves back to God. And you can't do that until you're self-possessed, until you possess yourself. But once you possess yourself, if you don't give it up, you just go through this endless cycle of hoarding and loss, life after life, life after life. So they go to Vrindavan, and the deal is, the older brother makes the deal, you can't take any money, you can't take any tickets, you can't tell anybody your paradox. I'm going to give you a one-way ticket to Vrindavan from Agra. You have to go there, you have to see all the sights, you have to not miss a meal, you can't tell anybody of the deal, and you have to find your way back before midnight. And Yogananda doesn't even hesitate, not for a moment. He says, great, I'll do it. And off they go, and instead of it being this disaster and this white-knuckle clinging to, oh my God, he just steps into it. And the very first thing that happens before they even get off the train is they're scooped up by these people and taken off to an ashram that was supposed to host a couple of princes that couldn't show up. And they end up getting hosted in place. He said, it's a meal I will never forget. And then they're walking off, and somebody else comes and scoops them up and says, I was meditating over there, I saw you as my guru, let me show you around, and buys them lunch and treats and shows them all the sights, and then buys them tickets at the end and showers them with rupees. And they get back on the train and they get back in time. The abundance of God is beyond our imagining, and the Bible talks about it, and it's great to think about it. But we have to test it ourselves. We have to put it into action for ourselves. There's a story of a man who was giving a talk at a Sunday service to the congregation, and he said, I was down to my last dollar. It was my entire wealth. And I had to choose whether to give it to God or keep it for myself. I gave it to God, and here I am wealthy, and I'm sure it's because of that. And he sat back down, and the congregation was all in awe about the effect of that, and the minister's wife looked over and said, I dare you to do it again. It's not enough to have, a lucky streak. That's not living in the presence of God. That's not the message. There's a couple of other stories that are just beautiful, and one of them is from our tradition. It's true. It's from up in Seattle. A couple where he was trying to create a startup, a .com startup. They were living on about $500 a month between the two of them. And that was on a good month. And they found Ananda and they started coming, and then they tuned into tithing. And so they started to tithe. They realized that tithing was a real principle, and so they started to tithe. Well, if two people are making $500 a month and trying to pay rent and utilities and food and everything else, it's hard. It hurts. 10%, and the Bible even says a tithe of it, more than a tithe. You have to give more than just the limit, because it's the freedom of heart. It's the relationship to God. It's not whether you gave your 10%. It's about the freedom of trusting that the infinite will take care of you. So they started tithing. They were $50 a month. And time passed, and even in the leanest times, they always gave their 10% and more. And in time, the business prospered. They gave $1 million tithe a few years later. They started another business, and a few years later, and they continued the tithing practice. A few years later, they donated several $1 million. There's a man in, and no, this is apocryphal, I don't know his name and I don't know the details, but he was a businessman, philanthropist here in the United States, and he got into it, and he said, why should I make God live on 10%? Why don't I live on 10% and God gets the 90%? So he decided he was going to tithe 90% of whatever, and he would start a business and he would just tithe enormously. And his businesses always prospered, and he got into this pattern where he would start a new business, he would tithe heavily, it would prosper, and then he would give it to his employees. Turn around and start another one because it was so much fun. We're in a time when there's a tremendous need in this world. There's an enormous amount of energy going in places that do not produce the kind of happiness that people want. And you vote. Every time you spend $1, you vote. Because whatever you spend your dollar on reinforces whatever it is that you just spent it on. There's an enormous need for places, sanctuary, to get away from the craziness. Sanctuary to get away from the stresses and from the tension that comes from trying really hard to find happiness and constantly being frustrated. There's a need around this world for sanctuaries like this temple that you're sitting in. Like the community a few miles away. Like Ananda Center at Laurelwood and Ananda House. Places where people can go and start to find themselves, find wholeness, find that connection with Spirit, and start to live from inside out and feel the guidance of God through these masters, helping us discover how to navigate. Yes, if you do it this way, and it always looks, one of the great magic things about Maya is Maya always makes it look like if you choose the divine choice, it will never work out. And it's always the only thing that does. It's always, at the end of the day, the only thing that ever really worked. There's a need for schools like Living Wisdom School, which is really growing the next generation of global leaders, because it's teaching people how to grow up in connection with the source inside themselves. To the degree that we give ourselves into the creation of these sanctuaries, these places, into their maintenance, their creation, their development, we ourselves are blessed. And far more, Yogananda has given us the power of spiritual community so that we get something else. We get the joy of being co-creative. We get the joy of the friendships. We get the joy of experiencing what he wrote in here. Where he wrote, "Give me holy health, but give it to my brothers even more. Give me power, but give it to others. But to others give it more abundantly, that I may wield my own strength through the strength of many. Give me wisdom, that I may make others even more wise. Teach me to behold all through the eyes, through all eyes, to work through all hands, and to feel the throb of my own feelings in all." The guidance is from these great masters. to start to serve, give ourselves over to God. Whatever we've been given, share it freely. Watch what happens. You have to do the experiment before you can prove it. Always looks like it'll never work. And it's always the only thing that does. And then we get not only the benefit of the experience, but we get the legacy, the karma, the blessings of having been a channel for the light and joy and freedom into this world that blesses so many others. I'd like to invite Dambara up, and we'll close the talk this morning with a little song that is a theme song from Ananda. It's one of a couple. The first theme song that Swami wrote was, "Go on alone, walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the goal is known?" You have to possess yourself first. But then once you do, just self-possession is not enough, coming together. And so this is many hands make a miracle. Let's stand and share this together.
Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful when people laugh and dance and struggle as friends, then all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle. People climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun.
Just a second. It's number 101 in your chant book. I see a lot of people who don't know. It's in your chant book if you want it. Okay. We'll do it again now.
Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful when people laugh and dance and struggle as friends, then all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle. People climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. We lift our hands to welcome the sun.
Thank you all. Let's be seated. We'll have some music.
Where he dwells. Where he dwells, the earth in gladness puts forth green herbs, shading trees. Where he dwells, the earth in gladness puts forth green herbs, shading trees. Gay streams bound through summer meadows, fragrance blows on every breeze. Gay streams bound through summer